Welcome to Modern Figures Podcast! Okay, so today we have with us Isa Watson. Hey girl!
Hi!
Who is the CEO of Squad, which is a software company whose social platform helps people build meaningful communities. And she's also one of INC Magazine's 30 Under 30 in 2017, and she's been featured by Fast Company and Forbes, among many other platforms. And she's also a writer for Entrepreneur, which is another venue where you can learn about how to be a business owner.
A boss.
A boss, yeah. What else?
She's also a Leaders in Tech Fellow, which is an awesome program for leaders to go to Silicon Valley and be able to build high-performing and culturally healthy organizations. If you didn't know, she's a classical pianist as well.
She's amazing.
You know, that wasn't enough accolades. She's also the former VP of product strategy at JP Morgan Chase. She was a digital product manager. She was a chemist at Pfizer, MBA from MIT. She has an MS in pharmacology, a BS in chemistry. Girl, what don't you do?
Okay, so I met Isa at a conference that's put on by AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I heard her on a panel of former scholars who'd come through one of the programs that they support. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's perfect. I sent Kyla a text message. I was like, we absolutely need to get her on this show. And I went up to talk to her, and I was nervous. I never get nervous talking to people. But she was also like standing on the stage and I was on the ground, so I feel like that was part of it. But we actually had something in common, which is very cool. So I work part-time with our graduate school here at UF, and Isa is very good friends with the dean of our graduate school, Dean Henry Frierson. So that's very awesome. And
awesome.
She was willing to come out, I think because of Hank Frierson. So shout out to him for making things happen.
And for you.
Yeah.
And for you.
Yeah.
So,
So
we had a good conversation in DC.
I appreciate that very much. That makes me feel a lot better.
Aww.
Okay, and then, so you did go to college, and you went to Hampton.
The real HU.
Oh, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. It had to come fairly soon.
Yeah, that's been like a common theme. Like a lot of our guests who've come that went to an HBCU for their undergrad, like that's been a very formative time for them to like gain confidence and not have to do a very difficult science or engineering major without, you know, all the overhead and microaggressions and other things that could happen at PWI, and then go on for a graduate degree and just have just this resilience and just this sense of self to say, I know I can do this.
Right. Yeah, and it's really special too because I did my research. I knew I wanted a chemistry degree, so I went to visit the chemistry department. My mom took me to the chemistry department in my senior year of high school, and I was talking to a lot of the students, and I was looking at what did the people from the previous classes do. People went to medical school, went to PhD programs, went to dental programs, all at like Harvard, Penn, MIT, Caltech. It was very like Hopkins.
Wow.
It was very consistently top tier, and there was very few people who didn't. And so I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm good.
So how did you move from chemistry into, I guess, the next stage of your
Wall Street.
Yeah, because it's a very different path than most people take.
I really enjoy chemistry. In fact, I still have a lot of chemist friends, and I have them talk chemistry to me so I don't forget the language.
It's important.
Yeah, exactly. And I was a discovery chemist at Pfizer. So I was focused on glucokinase activators, and I really enjoyed it. You know, and I also was wanting to be on the diabetes team because there's so much diabetes in my family, and so I could actually like feel really connected to what I was doing. But also being in the lab, I felt a little lonely as well. It can be a little isolating.
Yeah.
You come home, you like re-enter society at the end of the day, and no one knows what you're talking about. You can't talk about anything to anybody. And my parents were so sweet. You know, I would come home and I would say, you know, this 14710 touch as a cyclodecane, and then I like put the, you know, this molecule and this, you know, carbon, and they're like, that sounds great. But
That's wonderful, honey.
but the reality is that I wanted something where I was getting to a personality place where I wanted to interact more. And then on top of that, in pharma, if you're on the discovery side, I was literally conceptualizing the first molecules to put in the pipeline.
Wow.
You don't see the impact of anything until 20 years from now. Like, I will be retired 20 years from now, you know? And so I was missing that, you know.
The direct impact.
Yeah. And so I said, you know what, I want to go into the business realm with my science background, and went to business school at MIT. And
why MIT?
Yeah.
MIT was my first choice. So I applied to a slew of schools, you know, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Penn. But MIT was that one place where you had the perfect combination of people that were genius and humble. I didn't find that as much in my experience as some of the other places I was looking at.
I think too, you were in a space where you were interacting with people who were like on the cusp of discovery in a lot of different scientific fields too, by being at MIT. So maybe that was something that
it definitely attracted me, because I took classes at MIT main campus, and I took a few science oriented classes there too. A little stamp. And you know, MIT was actually, from an MBA perspective, people don't think about MIT, but MIT is the number 3 business school.
Who knew?
And so when I got in, I withdrew my application for everywhere else.
Wow. That is, so did you have that same feeling of like, you know, like being the only one and people not relating to what you do when you come home? Or could you come home and like say, this is what I did, and people are like, got it?
In business school, there was more of a community, more of a language that's accessible.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about like accessibility of the language. And I did a ton of different projects in business school spanning marketing. I moved out to China for a few months, worked over there. But I kind of fell into Wall Street. It was accidental.
Usually people are working their way to Wall Street. You're like, I just fell over there.
I fell into Wall Street.
And it was there.
I felt when I went to business school, I said, I am going to become a business development person at pharma. But in retrospect, I realized that was partly due to my insecurity. I had gone into school with people that had years at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and Bain and BCG, who had these really interesting business experiences, and I couldn't tell you when the day I stepped off campus what EBITDA was, what a cash flow statement was. I could tell you like how to read that NMR, but that, you know, my skill set was very specific, and so I was like, oh, no one's gonna want to hire me because I don't have business skills. And so when I started interacting with recruiters, they were like, oh my God, you study chemistry. And I was like, yeah. Do you know what chemistry is? Because it's not what you do. So that's when that kind of opened up my realm, and I got, you know, recruited.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think a lot of people don't realize how many industries need people who have this perspective from a STEM discipline.
Yeah.
Right? Because oftentimes when you're attracting talent to come into your industry, right, like, there are plenty of people who understand the business side of things. There are very few people who can take very technical content and translate it into the language that other people can understand.
Yeah.
And I also think that's sometimes our pitfall as scientists as well. You know, that communication and that translation to plain English. So when I was presenting all across, you know, the country, my grad advisors would say, if you can't explain this to your grandmother, and maybe let's assume she speaks a different language, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're not quite there yet. And so even I can tell you that I'm a chemist, I can tell you that I did organic chemistry, environmental chemistry, material science, but what I extract from that and how I communicate to the business world, I have very strong analytical skills. I have very strong technical communication skills. I'm very strong with data analytics, right? And those are the things that people over there understand that we have to summarize about our skill set. And I think a lot of times we don't summarize our skill set well.
Yeah, because we're in science, we're like, I apply this skill set to this very specific problem. So you talk about the very specific problem and not like the overarching, this is the skill that I use to solve that problem.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and there's a new field that's emerging very strongly right now, and here in our College of Journalism at UF, we have the STEM Translational Communication Center.
Yeah.
That's all they do. They focus on trying to help people like us communicate our science to like normal people.
Yeah.
Because I think our academic spaces are very much about maintaining this like air of elitism.
Yeah.
Like, we know what we do.
Yeah.
I don't need, a lay person to understand what I'm doing. But ultimately, a lot of our funding is provided by the general public, right?
Yeah.
The tax dollars that are funding a lot of the research we're doing.
Yeah, and you have to justify to taxpayers. Like, there's a whole document, like, for example, NSF, they have to write, we have two different versions of the abstract we have to write when we get the money. It's like the technical version for everybody who understands all the jargon, and then the public-facing abstract that, like, breaks everything down into why is this important, how is it going to benefit society, and that part is a challenge. And I tried to start, like, writing things about my research on Twitter, because if you can concisely say things in 100 and something characters in a language that people understand, like, that's a really, really good skill.
But also keep in mind, extending from the grant application and grant writing world, your science has very limited impact.
Yeah.
Because the ability to bring your science to the world, to materialize your science, is very interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
Whether that's through commercialization, whether that's through other things. But if you can't communicate to different people, you're limited. Like, even when I was at Pfizer, the way that I talked to the biologist was very different than the way I talked to the process chemist, which was very different than the way that I talked to the structural chemist, right? And that was like just in that little world.
Yeah, you're like code switching, like
all
you have
the
to know what
time.
everybody's like interest is, and
Yeah.
having to, that's amazing.
What's amazing is that you leverage all of that and then worked your way up to be the VP of Product Strategy at JP Morgan Chase.
Right.
Like, how do you do that? What is, what in the world is
know
that?
what that means.
So I came into a very specific program and pathway at JP Morgan Chase, and I had a fantastic time there. I'm still, very connected to my mentors and my sponsors there. But Jamie Dimon, who's their CEO, had created this program. I joke and I say it's to create mini Jamies. He had a very strong general management career, but it was basically to cultivate a very strong pipeline of general managers across the firm. And so what I would rotate across different businesses, mostly supporting like the C-suite people in different businesses, different business lines in New York, Hong Kong, and I essentially was a strategic right-hand partner. So I was a combination of let's help develop the strategy, let's help to execute it. And that's actually something that scientists are pretty good at, because you set up your lab stuff from the first of the week, and you're like, these are the experiments I'm going to run. Why? Because I want to test this theory, this theory, this theory. Okay, get to the end, and this is where I analyze my results. And I didn't even realize that was a skill set that I had.
Yeah.
It's very rare for someone to have a strategy and execution skill set that are both strong. And so I ended up, getting this really awesome role with the Chase side of, the bank, where I was VP of strategy focused on product, but my role was specifically to build and revamp the digital products for the 5 million American small businesses that Chase banks.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a huge initiative that I drove, and that was really exciting. Learned a ton about like interdisciplinary communication,
Like,
navigating.
I didn't need to know all this information about banks, but now I do.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow.
That's cool.
So is that kind of how we moved into like this entrepreneurial mindset?
It was a complicated decision. And the irony is that I went to MIT, which is one of the best schools for entrepreneurship. But when I was there, I was like, oh, y'all on this entrepreneurship hype. Like, I was like, it's for the birds.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, y'all gonna be broke. Like, I'm gonna get paid.
This is risky.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And what I learned about my skill set is that when I was at JP Morgan Chase, the way that the execs leveraged me was in a very entrepreneurial role within the firm. So I was like a resident entrepreneur. I was always assigned to different initiatives where they needed something built, a new division built, new products built within a place where it didn't exist or it needed to completely change. And so I started to just like build these things and, you know, continuing on from my science background. But the one thing about, from a content perspective, I would say my entree into entrepreneurship has two components to it. One is professional and one is personal. From a content perspective, I was going across different parts of the bank. And the bank is big. It's 250,000 people, which most people do not realize.
Yeah, they're massive.
They're huge. And one of the things that I saw was that the places of the bank that had the strongest sense of community within those divisions, you know, either driven by the leader or grassroots, you know, just employee engagement, employee community, those are stronger performing divisions, you know, and those are stronger performing places of the bank. So this whole notion of community that I had grown up with was very material and real, and all of a sudden I wasn't this creepy millennial who really wanted a community.
No, you're seeing how this benefits, like, the numbers are the numbers.
The numbers are the numbers, but also I grew up in a family that really valued community. I joke when I tell people, I say, my house was the community center of Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Did you have a revolving door?
Revolving door. Everyone's always
adults,
there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My parents took in, like, people that weren't my siblings, so lived with us.
Too? Yeah.
Discipline, all that stuff. And so, you know, at the time, I was just, you know, a little selfish teenager. I was like, I just want to study. It just needs to be quiet. So, like, you know, y'all need to go downstairs.
All these kids making noise.
Right. But the reality is that I look back on that and the impact that my parents were able to have on the people that they touch via the community that they created. It was so powerful.
Yeah.
Right? And you like, that's data points for years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then on the personal side, you know, my parents have always been about giving back. And giving, you know, what you contribute to this world must be significantly greater than what you take out from a resource perspective.
Which is a phenomenal thing to like have modeled for you, right?
Yeah.
Because most people, they don't have that inside, like in their family unit. Like they have to go external to their family unit to see that.
Well, I think tithing was part of our allowance, like, so.
Like, oh, you get this allowance, but this
and
portion.
my allowance was only like $40 a week that I had to make work for my car gas, food, and tithing, and I was like, $4 is a lot.
Like,
That's a lot.
couple gallons.
Right. Back then it was like a
back
couple
then,
gallons of gas. But my parents, you know, in the work that they did, they sponsored a bus trip for kids of visit colleges every single year. For about 8 years or so. And this one particular year, 6 years ago, my parents were, actually I should correct that, they sponsored bus trips for kids to visit the real HU, which is Hampton University.
Not colleges, just
not colleges, the real HU.
Right,
The real
got it,
HU,
okay.
yeah. And 6 years ago, that bus ran off a straight road and ejected both my parents, actually, and my dad did not survive the accident.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And so when things like that happen to you in life,
Wow.
that just changes your perspective on so much.
Yeah.
And one thing that my dad he used to say so many things to me where I was like, oh my God, Dad, shut up. Like, I'm so tired of hearing like this. I don't care. Like, I'm just trying to read my book. But, you know, one thing that he would say is that, you know, it's your job to, as a blessed person, he used to tell me, he was like, Izzy, you're a very blessed girl, you know, and it's your job to share your blessings with as many people as you can while you're on this earth. And another thing that he would say to me was that you think that your time on this earth is like infinite, but it's actually going to go by much more quickly than you think. So what are you going to do to make that impact? And so both of those things are going on. I'm like, this is really interesting. You know, I've seen community in my childhood. I didn't have the words or the maturity to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And then I saw it materialize in the workplace. And then I also, on my personal side, I came to a place where I was like, you know what? I'm going to live for me. I'm not going to be focused on this like partner track situation. I just need to make sure that I am going to do what God put me on this earth to do. And so that was the impetus for me leaving.
Wow.
What a
JP Morgan.
powerful story. That's amazing.
Yeah, one of my mentors who's also no longer here used to say, to whom much is given, much is required. And, you know, just, it's, you don't realize that you don't have the perspective at a young age. And then like you've been through all of your experiences and you can look back and say, oh, that's what that was about.
Right.
That's what was happening. That's amazing.
Right. And so what we built initially was a tool at Squad, which was formerly Invested, but we are Squad officially now, was a tool for people to cultivate community in the workplaces. And so you could think of it like a meetup for companies. Mm-hmm. And we had customers like Walmart.com, SeatGeek, JetVivo, like we were doing really well in that product. And the one thing that we were solving for was how to connect people across the organization. So the way the software would work, you know, Raul could put up a happy hour, Barbara could put up a lunch and learn, Susie could put up, you know, a wings dinner, and everybody could see what was going on and just sign up for different things.
That's cool. Through
the platform. And it had a crazy high adoption as well.
I'm sure.
We need that here.
Kyla. That's who Kyla and I are in Gainesville. Like,
we don't have any high tech, you know, software to do it. It's just a whole bunch of text messages and emails. But no, but community is so important. Like you, that's a huge part of my story. Like I had communities at every single phase, and I look back and I'm like, I would not have gotten through so many things if it wasn't for my communities at all those stages. So having it at work,
Yeah.
We might have to get Squad for you.
But we pivoted.
I was going to say it's different now.
Yeah.
We pivoted away from the workplace because it's really interesting. My mindset is so I'm such an experimentalist. I'm like, I'm going to have this going, test a red, test a blue, test a...
Yeah. Get all the results.
Right.
Yeah.
This concentration, that concentration. And we had a side experiment going on where we had the platform, but we just opened it up to people in New York City and to see what kind of community we would build. We actually just wanted to understand what events people were interested in so that we can use machine learning to push those to people.
That is cool.
And what we found was that community just blew up. And it like doubled every month.
Yeah.
What kinds of things were people, like the popular things people were putting on there?
Trivia nights, dinner parties, not like a party, but like intimate dinner gatherings, active things, so like yoga in the park, basketball, improv shows or improv workshops. And one of the things that I said, there's something going on over here that I can't ignore. There's like a fire in the corner and I'm like looking over here. And so I went over to the fire and I said I would start talking to all the users and spending a lot more time with them. And the one thing we found was that almost everyone was in their 20s and they were responding to the feeling of loneliness. And the millennials and Gen Z feel loneliness at a much higher rate than the boomers and the Xers.
I was just
so
listening to, like, I don't know if it was a podcast or something online that was talking about how loneliness is becoming an industry. And how, in particular, the millennial population are suffering from it the most.
Yeah.
And so there are several entities that are looking at ways to leverage that for their business, platform. Like, what can we do to address loneliness? And
that's so crazy too, because they have so many tools to keep them
but it's not providing
together.
the support that people want.
But actually the tools are actually very isolating. So people, the increase in loneliness, if you look at the data, it correlates directly with the increase in social media use.
Yeah, I believe it.
And so it's so easy to double tap.
And we're not engaging with people on a personal level, right? Like I know a lot of podcasts, they'll use like virtual means to record, but for us, I feel like for me, in my personal life, like I need to see someone. Like I need to be in a room with you to really engage
That's
with
also
you.
generational.
Yeah.
So my youngest brother is 24 or something like that. And
Something like that.
Mom says 25.
okay. she would know.
Yeah.
And he's a very charming guy, but the dude can like you tell him to like go build this relationship and then ask somebody for coffee. He's like, huh?
Oh wow.
He's like, I'll like their posts.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So
That sounds like my brother. Shout out Scooter Magruder. You know who you are. Yeah, I understand. He's 30 though, so he doesn't really have an excuse.
yeah.
No.
But yeah, I see that a lot. Isa, can you like give us a few sentences on what Squad is so everyone else can kind of understand what you do?
It's really interesting as a founder and as a CEO explaining what the company does and then hearing how people explain it.
I wouldn't even try because I have no concept of how to articulate that well.
People have explained Squad as a digital Soho house for millennials and Gen Z.
Okay.
Whoa.
So a place that curates, it's an exclusive community, so it's invite only, but the platform has private and curated event experiences, but the way that you interact with the application is more driven about the event experience, and then it goes into a live phase when the event is actually happening and shows you how to connect with different people.
That's cool.
Awesome.
It kind of guides you in that. And so we're launched in New York right now, and we're growing like crazy, you know, a little bit too crazy.
So the fire in the corner is now a wildfire.
The fire in the corner is now a wildfire.
Okay.
I went over and I found it and I brought it over. And so, but we're going to be expanding. We have waitlists active, and people are joining the waitlist every single day in markets like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Boston. London is a big market that is reaching out.
Austin, Boston.
Berlin.
And see, the computer scientist in me is like the scalability of this thing.
Oh, yeah.
You're live. You have the servers. You have like what
The cloud.
Yeah,
got
the cloud. Yeah, that's the only.
We're serverless now too, so basically we use AWS Lambda where we're able to dial up or dial down the number of servers that we use.
And AWS is Amazon Web Services. Amazing cloud support for just about everything. This is not a sponsored ad. We just like AWS.
No, I think that's great that you, because I'm sitting here like, oh, yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. So people in New York get to have it, and the rest of us get to wait.
Yeah, how do they get to be, like, what's the process? Somebody recommends you, and then...
We've been prioritizing referrals because, just to give you numbers, like even in like the last week and a half, 1,200 applications came in.
Wow.
Whoa.
So we don't have the bandwidth to do all that. So
how large is your team?
Yeah.
Team is about 10 people.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But even if everybody took 120 applications,
But I need my
every
engineers to
week,
build.
Yeah.
that is so much.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
We need to like create a little squad of our IMCS people and be like,
yeah.
go help Isa and her team, all the computer scientists. That'd be
I'll
really
take
cool.
them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I gotta work.
Good to know.
And we will throw them.
So how do you manage that? How do you manage being a CEO? You've created community for other people. What is your community like? Like, how are you balancing that kind of thing?
That was a struggle for me when I first started as an entrepreneur. And I think that I hear a lot of people talk about their desire to be an entrepreneur, and they talk about their idea and the excitement. But it's just as much of a personal sacrifice and personal struggle that goes with that. And I didn't really have a lot of discipline around taking care of myself when I first started. And so I remember there was a time where I was literally only sleeping 3 hours a night for like months at a time.
Oh my God, that is not sustainable at all.
And so I got like sick for the first time. I got a stomach ulcer.
Sick.
Oh, no.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
And so I went to the doctor and he was like, this is a stress-induced stomach ulcer. And I was like, I don't think you get it. I was like, my name is Isa Watson. I don't get stressed. I get stuff done.
Right.
I was like, if you don't know, you better ask anybody around who knows. But I don't get stressed.
Let them know.
And he was like, Isa, that is not how your body sees
your body
it.
is telling you differently.
Yeah. And so I I went through a phase where I said, I have to learn what a process of taking care of myself looks like. I got really into meditation. That's been incredibly helpful. So I go to meditation class about 3 to 4 times a week.
Cool.
I see my therapist every Tuesday, and I'm very open about it with my team. I'm like, every Tuesday, 6 o'clock, they know. They're like, oh, we know you gotta go see Dr. Mel. They're like, how's Dr. Mel? You know? And I also have a life coach that I see twice a month. And so that was my kind of, community to help me. But even from a friend perspective, when you go through these phases in your life and someone was really good for one particular season, and that they may not be vibing and, jiving with you for the next season. And so even figuring out who were the best friends to have around, and I'm not going to lie to you, as an entrepreneur, what I need personally is empathy. There's certain things that happen where I just need people to be understanding. I may back out of a dinner on Friday because I'm just so exhausted, and then my investor called me from San Francisco upset about this particular metric, and I just really need time to recoup. Like, can I take a rain check? But you'd be surprised how many people will, like, get so mad.
Oh,
and,
no,
like,
take things personally.
Yeah, and that's same sort of here. Like, they're content with you being in this one box, but then once things get crazy and stuff may happen, they're like, oh no, you didn't show up for me. And it's like, look, I'm taking care of me.
Right.
Yeah, I think that comes with being someone who's high achieving, right? Not every person can walk that lifestyle with you. Like, they just can't. One, because it kind of opens up this window into your insecurities too, right? When you see somebody who's excelling, and you might not feel like you're excelling at the same rate. So you have people who don't know how to deal with that.
Right.
And then you have people who, they just want your life for better or worse. And it's like, we can't all be the same person.
Right.
Our unique qualities about, like, what we're capable of and what we're interested in and all those things is what makes the world interesting and valuable and worth being a part of.
I even tell that to my team. I'm like, everyone, you need to show up as you are, who you are. Like, I don't want you to try to be something that you're not. That's not fun for me or fun for the team. But on the community side, I found that in the last 3 years, the new friends that I've had are almost all founders.
Wow, because y'all understand each other.
And there's a lot of crazy. There's a lot of crazy. So there's it's a unique type of crazy that, like, even my mom doesn't understand it,
But someone told the phrase that I heard about just like friendships and being high achieving, the people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind don't matter.
Yeah.
So it's like it's very hard and fast, cut and dry rule, but that's what it usually boils down to.
Yeah.
That's real, because I know I had to cut some people loose. Because they were weighing me down, right? They were adding to my stress instead of helping alleviate my stress. And I'm so grateful that you're so open about going to therapy and having somebody who's there to support your mental and emotional health, because that's something in our community we really shy away from, and we shouldn't. There's a reason that people get degrees.
Right.
In counseling and psychology to be able to support people. And when you're high achieving, oftentimes it's very difficult to notice that someone is going through a stressful situation.
Right.
Or is experiencing something that they really need to get help for. Because we just don't show it, right? Like, we just walk through our day-to-day, and we're excellent and still achieving.
And we're trained that way. We're trained that we can't be vulnerable, because if you see us slipping, then that's like, but it's, my mom and I have had this conversation. I've been open with her about this, but I remember asking to go to therapy when I was in high school. And my mom was like, what you need to do is go to Sunday school on time and get up and get dressed like I told you.
What you need is Jesus, not therapy.
What you need is Jesus, and you need to stop playing, like, out here. And there's
Christian counselors are a whole thing, so you can do both,
There's this thing that therapy is for white people, and it's for everybody.
My grandma, like, why are you gonna go tell that white man all your problems? Like, that's the general consensus sometimes in households, like.
But there are black therapists.
Yes,
so.
My therapist is black.
Yeah.
I tried to find one. There's like a black therapist, like database.
Yes.
Like Gainesville.
I found my therapist on that.
But yeah, just all in all, it's important for people to just get out there, see a therapist, just talk to somebody. You know, it's not this huge taboo thing.
It's okay to be vulnerable too.
Absolutely. So for people who are out there that, want to start their own tech company, like, how did you get started? How did you do this? It started off probably as an idea in your head, and you got all the way to this widely growing, company. Like, how did you do this?
It all generally starts with an idea when it starts out correct. Because you hear those people that are like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to be my own boss.
Right.
Or I don't want no corporate politics. But the reality is that if you raise money, you have a ton of politics,
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that it's first about coming up with a gap in the market.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think a lot of people say in Silicon Valley, what's the big problem that you are addressing, right? And some things don't even seem like that big of a problem, because what problem was Facebook really addressing?
That's a good point.
What problem was even Slack really addressing?
Yeah.
And so, but come up with a gap in the market that you're passionate about, that you are comfortable thinking about this 26 out of 24 hours of the day. Because that's how much you really have to fit out.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I find, one question I get from a lot of Black entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs in general, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, the first thing they ask me is, how'd you raise money? And I'm like, that should not be your first question.
Really?
It should
I don't
not
think
be.
so. I mean, like, if you don't have a good idea,
But
however much money you raise doesn't matter,
That's
right?
true.
But the reality is that it's not even about the money. It's like, what have you shown to demonstrate that this is interesting enough that people use it? There's so many tools that are free or very cheap to use. So let's say you don't have a coding background, and I have this idea for an app. I can actually go to Envision and sketch out an app, and you can download it to your phone, make it clickable, and watch people click through that.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can take that and see if you can get some type of traction, right? So it's becoming harder and harder to raise money because investors have a much higher demand and bar for what traction is. And for people that don't know what traction is, it's demonstrated revenue or demonstrated users, user acquisition, et cetera. People are using your product and people are paying for your product. And so I think that, like I said, starting with a gap, try to demonstrate some traction and try to do it with your own money first, if you can. Do a little church fundraiser or something.
Yeah.
And then I think it's about finding strong angel investors. We raised $3.5 million from Silicon Valley.
Wow.
And that's not the first step. The first step is finding people who generally have some level of net worth where they can just write $25,000 checks, write $10,000 checks, and get them to believe in you so you can get a little bit more money to get more traction, and then use that to then go to VCs. And so I think it's,
That is so funny. It like parallels with like being an assistant professor. Like we get this little startup package. You do your little research, show that it's viable, show that you get step 1 of the data done, and then you apply for this bigger amount of money. But there's so many parallels.
And Angelique Johnson, who's
shout out
one
to
of Kyla's
Angie.
friends, came on recently, and she talked about how not every angel investor is the right angel investor for you, right?
Oh, that's a huge point. You can't take just anybody's money. In fact, I've turned away more money than I was able to take this last round.
What?
This last round,
Look,
I had $6 or $7 million that was on the table, and so I had to push out half of the money. And when I think about an angel investor, here's what I think about, and I think this is so important. And we can't be desperate here. We have to be this is super critical. The person needs to deliver some value to you, like they have a great network, or I'm in this specific topic and they're an expert, or they just believe in you. Like there's an angel investor I have where she just calls me and says nice things, and it feels good. And I rarely ever talk to her about the business, and I don't want to talk about it all the time, The second thing is that you need to trust them and know that they'll have your back. Because reality is, Uber has done it at like massive levels of like mess ups. A lot of companies have mess ups at lower levels, but who's going to be in your corner and have your back? So you have to think, are they decent people? Are they people you can trust? Are they people that you can have open, honest communication with? Right? And so I think that those are kind of what should shape how you choose angel investors as opposed to like, that person's in, that person's in. You can't take everyone's money. You wouldn't get married to everybody.
Right. Don't be thirsty when it comes to this investment.
Right. So, but the thing about it is that like when you take someone's money, you're like married to them for like a long time.
And what strings are attached to that money
Exactly.
that you may or may not want to be attached to.
Right.
Yeah, long term.
100%.
My investors say when they signed with me, they had the assumption that they were in with me for 10 years. I was like, 10 years?
Wow.
Yeah, they're like, we made a commitment to you for 10 years. That's what this money represents.
Well, that's great. So it's about relationships, and it's really about like having a solid foundation, not just flying by the wind of, or what is it?
By the seat of your pants.
Thank you.
It is about relationships, but I don't want to overemphasize relationships because the reality is that in the Black community, we're starting behind in a lot of these relationships. It took me, with all the degrees that I have from MIT, Cornell, Hampton, etc., it took me 2 years of nonstop meetings to really penetrate Silicon Valley in a meaningful way.
But you found a way to make relationships with people, and I don't think any business exists without legitimate relationships.
That's true, but I think that a lot of people just rely on the relationships that they have. So and I think there's a very like hustle mentality that you need to have to like go out here and build relationships very strategically. And the trick to knowing if you're building really great relationships, and I always tell everyone in their 20s this, when you meet that person and you end the meeting with that person, how many people has that person said they want you to meet that's in their network too? And so it becomes this like network effect, almost like synapses in the brain, you know? And so that was how I ended up with like hundreds of meetings in Silicon Valley. And now our earliest investor, our lead investor is, you know, a firm called Harrison Metal, and they were the earliest institutional capital into Birchbox and Harry's.
Oh, wow.
Harry's just exited yesterday for $1.4 billion.
Wow. That's amazing.
Heroku.
Oh, wow.
He was the earliest institutional capital in Heroku, and so like he's very well known and well respected. His name is Michael Deering, but again, it took a long. I didn't wake up one day and like was all of a sudden in his network. It took a long time for me to like.
And people don't
hustle.
Get that.
Yeah,
they think I'm gonna do this one pitch and then they're gonna be wowed and give me their money. Like it's a
hard
marathon.
work.
Like you have to.
And your reputation precedes you. So before I meet people, they have heard a lot about me, and so I've seen a lot of decks go around. I've seen a lot of emails go around between investor communities of people that just have really big mess ups of things.
What kind of mess ups? You don't have to name names, but like, what are some mistakes that people make?
So one mistake is even how they engage with investors, like being too aggressive. Oh, you didn't answer my email, so I assume, you know, that I take a conclusion that you actually don't care about what, you know, people pop off at the mouth, and it's not personal. Like, I didn't answer your email because I had 999 other emails and I just didn't get to it. That's why I didn't answer your email. Or the decks not being very clear about what it is they're trying to do, or a market is, they're like, I have a
Can you
$4 trillion
tell
market.
everyone what a deck is
It's a
so they
slide
understand?
deck.
So a pitch deck, if you're going out to raise capital for angels or for institutional or VCs, is essentially you probably build it in PowerPoint, but it's a series of pages that tell the story of what you're trying to do. What's the idea? What's the problem? How big is the market that you're going after? Can this be a $400 million business? Can it be a $4 billion business? And then who your team is and what you're trying to raise money and what that gets you.
Yeah.
So having that be solid is obviously important because it speaks for you.
It speaks for you.
Yeah, because usually you give them a copy of it like after you've left, and if there's typos or it's just not clear what you're doing, you know, like you said, clarity is huge.
Yeah.
Well, Isa, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Was there anything else you wanted people like to know that's coming up next? What should they look out for?
Well, if people are interested in our awesome community at Squad, I would encourage them to submit applications to our website, which is withyoursquad.com. And in the reference, when they say who referred you, just put
Modern figures.
Oh,
we get it.
So that way I
get
put modern figures. That way I'll have our team ping it so that we bring those applications to the top.
Cool.
So how can people follow you online or on social media?
You can follow me I'm mostly on Instagram, and then I'm like somewhat on Twitter. So I'm at Isa, ISAD, as in Diane, Watson, I was gonna say at Gmail. No, that's not it. But I'm at Isa D. Watson.
But we'll link it too on the website.
On LinkedIn and Twitter.
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much for coming and talking with us.
And thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.